Putin and Russian army is losing against Ukrainian army. So that's why they are taking revenge on Ukrainian civilians. And by this terror, trying to destroy moral in the society and to make Ukraine to go on some negotiations and on giving up of our territories.
Now, Ukraine's security service has raided a historic monastery in Kyiv in an operation it says was aimed at stopping Russian agents using the site for sabotage, intelligence or weapons. It comes as power cuts continue to make everyday life a struggle right across the country. The World Health Organization has warned the lack of power is putting the lives of millions of people at risk. A short time earlier, I spoke to Oleksiy Honcharenko, who is a Ukrainian MP and former chairman of the Odessa Council, and he told me more about the severity of the power cuts.
The situation is very difficult. Millions of Ukrainians every day are without power supply. And me personally, for example, my apartment, we were without power supply for 36 hours. Then it was restored for several hours. Then again, it wasn't. So, and it's like this. And millions of Ukrainians are in the same situation. And for sure, it's a big challenge, especially when the winter is coming. And in the big cities, just imagine people who are living on the 20th floor without electricity, no elevators working, no electricity, no water supply, no heating. And that is a real disaster. So the situation is difficult.
How on earth do you cope without power for 36 hours? Presumably it gets very cold now as well.
Yeah, it is 36 hours was not a catastrophe, but if it would be more, for sure, it is a big problem. People are using power banks just to charge their gadgets and things like this. Those who can are buying generators, especially those who have houses. But also that is not so easy even to find today in Ukraine generator, and certainly not many Ukrainians can afford it, both to buy and then to use because it's very expensive. So that is a very serious problem. Part of people are considering options of coming to rural area, of moving to a rural area for a winter time. But if the situation will not be improved, I mean that I think that there will be a new wave of displaced people, desperate people who will again come to Europe.
Because people will feel that they simply cannot stay in the country without power.
Because people cannot survive in the winter in big cities without power.
And there must be many vulnerable people, perhaps elderly people, who are going to be seriously at risk if this continues.
Yeah, mostly who is suffering? Elder people, ill people, poorer people, those who can afford, like I said, generator or something like this. They are in slightly better condition. So this is a real humanitarian catastrophe which is going on.
And what is the government, the authorities doing to try to restore power? Are they making sufficient efforts to try to reconnect people?
They are doing sufficient efforts, but the problem is that Russia is attacking energy infrastructure. And even after Ukraine and energy system, they repair some equipment, changing some equipment. Then again, new Russian missile attacks. And I can tell you, there is no government in the world which can cope with these. Like on 100%, so in general, can cope with this. So it's not a question about the government. It's a question that Russia, by military way, is absolutely consciously destroying critical infrastructure in order to make people suffer. That is a war crime. That is a genocide. But that's what they're doing. And the best solution is to defend critical infrastructure. But for this, we need much more air defense. We're very thankful for what we received. But for example, Ukraine received 2 systems air defense NASAMS, which are very effective, by the way. And again, we are very thankful for them. But for your understanding, just to cover one big city like Odessa, my native city, completely, we need at least three NASAMS, and we have two of them for the whole country. So we have what we have is not sufficient to cover the most important parts.
So your appeal to the West would be to provide more of these air defences.
More and quicker.
We had this warning from the World Health Organization that the lives of millions of people are now under threat because of the power cuts. Um, do you think that this is an attempt by Russia to undermine the Ukrainians' morale during this winter?
Yeah, for sure. That's because Putin and Russian army is losing against Ukrainian army. So that's why they're taking revenge on Ukrainian civilians. And by this terror, trying to destroy moral in the society and to make Ukraine to go on some negotiations and on giving up of our territories. But this will not happen. And all history of humankind is showing us that such terror never works. And just, I don't know, bombing of London during the Second World War, that just simply doesn't work. Yes, people are suffering, but people are not from this wanting to give up, but quite opposite. People are becoming furious.
So you don't think it is succeeding in perhaps making Ukrainians think that it's not worth continuing the fight?
No, absolutely. And we have interesting sociological polls, for example, that cities which are bombed by Russians more than others are less for them is less possible to even to speak with Russia. I mean, so those who are bombed by Russia more, they just hate Russia more and they just more want to destroy it.
What about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which used to provide quite a bit of Ukraine's electricity? There were reports in the last few days of more shelling around that area.
Yeah, it's the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, the third biggest in the world, and very serious part of Ukrainian energy system. And one of our problems is that it is disconnected from Ukrainian energy system. And we see a lot of shelling there. And it's I mean, it's ridiculous when I hear that Russia is accusing in this Ukraine. What is the what is the interest of Ukraine to receive on our territory in the middle of our country? And this nuclear power plant is almost in the middle of our country to receive nuclear catastrophe. What can be reason for this? I mean, it's complete nonsense. So it's part of Russian nuclear blackmailing, which they are doing with the nuclear weaponry, but also using a Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
I'm seeing reports that Ukraine's security service has raided a monastery in Kyiv, saying that it believes that Russian agents were using the site for sabotage or intelligence. Is there anything more that you can tell us about that?
Yeah, we have today news about this, and we have in Ukraine so-called we call it Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy, and it means that this is a church which is governed and ruled from Moscow. And for sure, unfortunately, that is not a church, and a part of it, at least part of this church, are just agents and fifth column in this war against our country. And unfortunately, we have a number of cases, especially on occupied territories, when priests of this church and those who are around are using these properties, this territory, and these people against Ukraine. So for sure, we need to defend ourselves. And in general, the situation when we have everything governed from Moscow today is a threat to Ukraine.
But this was a monastery right in the heart of Kyiv, and there was real concern, was there, that there were Russian agents there, or were these local Ukrainians who were perhaps collaborating?
Yeah, we are speaking about this monastery, and it is in the heart of Kiev, and that is like twice more dangerous because it's in the heart of Kiev. And yes, we see evidences that such objects and such monasteries are used by this Russian, in fact, church against Ukraine as a state. So that is a threat, and we need to work on it.
Just finally, we had at the weekend the first visit by our new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to Kyiv to meet your president, President Zelensky. How important do you think that trip was and his message of Britain's continued support for Ukraine?
It is very important. We are very thankful to the United Kingdom, to people of the UK, and to government of the UK. It's the third prime minister during this invasion, and that is very important that we know and we see continuity of this policy. That prime ministers are changing, but the support of the United Kingdom to Ukraine is not. It's very important for us, especially when after Boris Johnson, who is really like a national hero in Ukraine because of his firm position and the fact that he came to Kiev at the most dangerous moments and showed really leadership. And we are really thankful for this. So it is important to see that a new British Prime Minister is also committed to restoration of international order through Ukrainian victory and to support of our country and to develop these very important relationships which emerged during these months, and I think from which both our nations will benefit in the future.
Well, that was the Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Honcharenko speaking to me just a little earlier.